Ah yes, video games. Quite possibly the greatest thing of all time. Only outmatched by video game music. Which just happens to be what I'm talking about in this video. Whenever I'm asked what I listen to, I'll say something like, oh, you know, I'm a musician, so a little bit of everything. And while that's kind of true, my real answer would just be, okay, so there's this really niche game called Toho. But you see, non-gamers just don't understand. They're expecting me to say an artist that they know. So, this video is for all of the epic gamers out there. This one isn't going to be all, this is how you write a melody, but more like, this is how you take it one step further to make your video game music more interesting. If you're looking for more of a foundation for music writing itself, I have a bunch of other videos that I'll link below. Alright, let's get to gaming. This time, I'm going to be showcasing a session I already have written from a game music assignment from college. This session will help perfectly illustrate the points I want to cover here. So, think about this for a sec. How does a game soundtrack influence your epic gaming experience? It has to pull at your heartstrings and accompany your battles, among many other things. One way that game soundtracks can accomplish all this is by being connected with leitmotifs, that being a musical phrase that accompanies a reoccurring theme, idea, or character. Think about the games you play. I bet many of them have main menu themes, level themes, and final boss themes that share similar musical ideas. Right off the top of my head, I think of two fantastic indie titles, Celeste and Undertale, both of which have a theme that is incorporated throughout their campaign. The reappearance of these leitmotifs make the whole story feel connected, and it provides this sense of familiarity to the player. And when the theme from the tutorial plays in the final boss fight, and it shows how far you've come, and oh my god, it's so epic, and then you feel like the most badass ever, and then you just transcend reality. Yes, dude, I love video games. These battles and levels are already awesome, but they're brought to life by their music and all of these connected motifs. These themes can also be part of the face of the game, making you go, oh yeah, that's the theme from that game. So what I'm going to show you is how to take a motif and switch it up for whatever your game might need using this project. My motif is simple, being these 4 notes. Yep, there it is. Dun 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 dun. That's just the motif on its own, and what I used whenever the player beats the game this was for. Listen, it's quite triumphant. Alright, get used to that little tune. But what happens when the opposite occurs? When the player dies? It can't be all cool sounding or it'll kill the immersion. Check it out. It's the exact same notes, but I've just changed how I've played them to have that sound of defeat, you know? I hope this motif is burned into your brain now, because I want you to keep an ear open for it, because I promise you, it's everywhere. So now, you're just running around and exploring the level, and this is the music. Well, that probably sounded very different and more involved than the previous bits I played for you. All those parts are built around that same motif idea. See? It's all the same notes, just being played in different ways or with different instruments. This makes it so no matter what situation the player is in, it still has the sound of the game. So what happens when you enter battle? Let's listen. The versions of the motif are everywhere, and they're played a bit quicker to fit the mood of fighting, right? And all the counter melodies are even slower or faster versions of it over top. Is it starting to come together? That was another example of me changing it up even more. This was the theme I wrote for the campaign music, meant to sound kind of ominous for the lore. Once again, it's just the same idea, but much slower and darker. I even added an accidental, or a key outside of the key signature to make it more detectable. In this case, something is mysterious. Of course, having a leitmotif doesn't mean you're locked into one key or speed for your whole game. You can transpose or adapt it however you see fit. This is a huge part of how many famous game composers can keep recycling their ideas for any story beat of the game. Isn't that amazing? And meanwhile, it helps further immerse the player in the world. So it's really easy for me to say that I'm just changing things as I think makes sense, but you may still find yourself a little stuck. So here's some variation ideas I like for different themes. If you need a sadder or spooky version of your motif, try lowering one of your melody notes a half step. It's unexpected and it gets the attention of the listener that this is a serious moment. If you want something with more action, try turning your melody into a fast ostinato to keep up the pace. You could even have more variations of it play slower over top if you wanted. And if you want to switch things up even further, I always love including key changes. And while I keep going on and on about recycling ideas, that doesn't mean you can't have other ideas in there too. Balance is important. This project is a very extreme example of keeping the music connected, but it would kind of suck if you spent all this money on a game and its entire soundtrack was just the exact same thing over and over again. Just like in any other medium, I personally think leitmotifs shine brightest for character appearances. Like, whenever you interact with a character and it plays this little tune, and then later, when they end up being the final boss or something, it's the same idea but epic and dark. You know what I mean? Games often do this, but with multiple motifs for different things, such as like plots or characters. Take one of my favorites, Pokemon, for example. Every rival, friend, and boss characters all have their own theme, having versions for talking to them in the overworld and fighting them. In addition, every town and route also have their own themes, separate from each other, but they all come together to make the sound of a Pokemon game. And of course, whatever vibe you're going for can also determine how much you lean into your existing ideas. Alright, there, literally everything was the motif. Now that we're fighting the final boss, that motif is still very much incorporated, but there are some other things in there too. While all the other parts are built around my original idea, that's not all there is to it. Depending on what kind of game or project you're working on, you'll want to find the balance of how much your motifs are used throughout. Whether that just be one phrase like I have in this demo, or an elaborate variety of themes. And making video game scores doesn't necessarily mean your music needs to be connected at all. Many great games just have a theme for each aspect, and that's that. I personally love writing melodies and motifs for everything, so one of the greatest joys of music producing for me is creating those ideas and then finding creative ways to use them or not. Video games are really neat in the sense that they don't have a fixed timeline. They aren't movies that play from start to finish the same way every time. A player could go AFK in the lobby for hours, or speedrun the whole game, blazing through all the dialogue and stuff. The thoughts and movements of the player have to be considered for how the music will play out. So, what do I mean by that? Well, have you ever been playing a game that has really simple music, but progresses as you advance the level? The timing of it feels supernatural, lining up with your experience. Or have you ever played a visual novel that has music playing, but the big epic part of the song hits exactly when the dramatic reveal happens? This is achieved by writing your music as a series of loops that can sync up with the gameplay if so desired. You may notice that in my session here, I don't have a single boss theme, for example. I have an intro, A, B, and C loops. All of these loops I've created are 4 to 16 bars, which... Wait, doesn't that sound similar to how I write sections following regular song structure? Yeah. You can also see that every little loop I have here has a bar of fade in and fade out. This is so all of them can transition perfectly into each other. When you write your music like this, it can be implemented into your game in a variety of really cool ways. You could have certain layers of your music only come in when the player has low health or a power item, for example. Or you could fade out the music completely if they go out of bounds or underwater. You can have the music progress along with the player, or you can randomize your loops so the music never gets too repetitive. Whatever style of game and music you're working on will dictate how this is all implemented, as well as whatever software you choose to implement it in. This is a more general video, and I am by no means a programmer, so I'll leave that aspect up to you. But I would strongly encourage you to think about how your epic compositions can be more in tune with the player and bring more life to the gameplay. I'm a composer, so whenever games do cool stuff like this, I geek out like crazy. But you don't have to be a musician to notice and appreciate these progressions. I'd imagine these kinds of developments in music and gameplay probably seem like pure magic to someone who has little or no experience with music. So, to conclude, video games and their music are fantastic. And with so many components and layers involved, it's extremely awesome and wide open for options and personalization. I've done quite a few small game projects and jams now, and the stuff I've mentioned are some of the things I always think about when I'm writing the scores. Of course, as I am something of the epic gamer variety, I take inspiration from all the amazing games and anime I enjoy. So I recommend doing the same with whatever you like. No joke, on the last game jam I did, the designer just sent me a link to some 80s games and was like, yeah, just make this. So, have fun writing expressive motifs and music for your epic video games. And who knows, maybe it'll eventually end up on those playlists of nostalgic game mixes you always see on YouTube. I know we're all guilty of listening to those Minecraft but you feel like a kid again playlists. And that is everything I wanted to cover. I hope you enjoyed and could maybe get something out of this video. Like usual, I have to thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Cheers, guys!